Welcome to Better Sex, where you get the information and inspiration to create and enjoy your best possible sex life. Join your host, sex therapist Jessa Zimmerman, as she brings you expert guests, helpful tips, knowledge, and strategies to improve your intimate relationships. And now, your host, Jessa Zimmerman.
Hi, it's Jessa, back for another episode of the Better Sex Podcast. Thank you for spending this time with me. I'm glad you're here. You know, I do this because I want to help educate people, right? I want to bring you information and ideas that you can put into practice and actually change your relationship and your sex life. To that end, you know, that's why I wrote my book, so it could be this sort of do-it-yourself program that you could put into practice, not just describing the problem of sexual avoidance. That's why I've developed the online course, because I figured the book is kind of hard to actually do everything without some support. So I wanted to, create some vehicles to help you actually make these changes. So a big part of the emphasis of my work, as a therapist, certainly, but as a podcaster, as an author, speaker, all these things, is to really try to help people make change. And part of that is by bringing good quality information and resources to you. And today's show, I am talking to Mark Schoen, who is the founder of SexSmartFilms. So he has produced over 50 educational films in his lifetime. Still going, not like it's done, all about sex education, right? Opening our eyes and our minds to what's normal, what's healthy, how to get better, how to make changes, right? It's this incredible resource. He shares a story. It's actually really surprising how he got into this business, because it was not where he was going. He was going to be a hockey player, he said. But he ended up on this path of sex education. And he's been a superstar in this field with all kinds of recognition from sexuality organizations, and is now, the host of the SexSmartFilms website that once you subscribe, or you can pay per view, not for much money, you have access to over 650 films about sex that are, not pornography, that are educational or research-based or therapy-based. So really a wonderful resource. I'm happy to promote it. And we really had a great conversation about his long career in this industry and where it's going next. Hope you enjoy it. Mark, thank you so much for being on the show with me today.
Oh, you're very welcome.
This is going to be an interesting conversation. You've been doing this a long time, right?
A very long time.
Do you want to give us a little bit of, let's go back in time to the history. Like, how did you start out making sex films?
Well, I got out of undergraduate school, and I was a health educator in New York. And my second year there, they mandated that we teach about sexually transmitted infections. They also said we didn't have to talk about sex. So I was teaching 7th grade, 12, 13-year-olds. And I'll never forget the first day of class. I wrote the names of the diseases on the board. And I said, you get these diseases through sexual contact. Okay. Hands went up.
Really?
What does that mean? And I said, either intercourse or oral genital contact. What does that mean?
Wow.
So I spent 40 some odd minutes telling them what I meant by sexual contact.
Huh.
I walk out of the room, and the school principal was waiting for me. And he knew it was this first day, and he said, how did it go?
Oh, okay. So it's not like word had already leaked somehow that you're teaching the kids about sex.
No.
Okay.
So I walk out of the room, and he said, how did it go? And I said, well, if I were a parent, I wouldn't be happy. He said, why? I said, I'm teaching them about sexuality by way of disease.
Yeah.
And he said, well, oh my. And he said, well, what do you think we should do? And we talked a little while. And I said, I think we should talk about have a sex education program. And the school principal looked at me, paused a second, and said, let's go for it.
Wow.
And we started a sex education program. And I enrolled and this is showing how long ago this is, in the human sexuality program at New York University. And that was 1974. That program doesn't exist anymore.
So back then, there was not sex ed in schools?
No.
Wow,
no.
I'm dating myself too. I must be slightly younger than you are, but
yes, wow. There was no sex education in New York schools, and the only thing you taught was about sexual anatomy and disease.
Okay.
So the girls would get a lesson on menstruation.
Right.
The boys would get a lesson where it talked about ejaculation. And so it was just anatomy.
Okay.
I went to Sweden the summer of 1974 and took into this human sexuality program. And I had made a little 35 millimeter slide program to use in my classes. And I showed it to the professor there, and he encouraged me to make more films. And after that summer in Sweden, I was hooked. I went on and got a doctorate. I left my teaching job. I started making films and was showing films in universities, and people were using my films. And I remember Dr. Ruth, who was in New York, and this was before she was famous, she would use my films and help me sell them.
Oh, wow.
And one day she came up to me and said, Mark, you should put me in one of your films. and I thought to myself, here's this woman who's barely 5 feet tall. She speaks with a heavy German accent, and she wants to host the film. So I did not use her.
Oh, you didn't? I was going to say, sure, okay, let's do it.
No. And then about a year later, she called me and she says, I have my own radio show. She had a 15-minute radio show on NBC radio at midnight. And that launched her career.
Yeah.
A few years later, I got hired by the Sinclair Institute in North Carolina, and I was producing all their adult sex education programs, one of which was the Better Sex video series, which sold millions of copies. And they knew I knew Dr. Ruth, so they said to me, why don't you see if she'll host one of our shows? So I said, okay. And I called her up, and she said to me, Mark, call my agent. So we never got to work together, but we would see each other for occasionally and have some good laughs.
Yeah.
So, but getting back to the films, you have to remember there was no internet when this all started.
Right.
Today, the average American sees porn on the internet by the time they're 11 years old.
Yeah.
And some younger. And the unfortunate thing is, for most of them, that's their only sex education.
Right, which I always point out that is actually not sex or sex education, right? But it is where people are thinking they're getting that learning.
Believe me,
they're learning something, but
obviously they're learning. But believe me, I know people who produce porn films.
Yeah,
and none of them produce them to educate 10 and 11-year-olds.
Right. Well, I'm not sure they even were producing it to educate 18.
Yeah, but yes.
Yeah.
But so, we started producing at the beginning. It was for adults, and I did a children's film, a preschool film called Belly Buttons Are Navels, and there's a book out, Belly Buttons Are Navels, which is available on Amazon, and it was made for children 5 and younger. And basically, it was a grandmother reading a story to 2 young children, and it was a list of body parts. Like you would have a book of colors, a book of shapes. This was a book of body parts.
Okay.
And I remember when Mary Calderon wrote the foreword, and she was the executive director of SECUS, the Sex Information and Education Council of the United States.
Yeah.
And she got her agent to represent the book. And the publisher that publishes the Dr. Seuss books wanted to publish this book. And they said, I just have to eliminate one word from the book.
Which was what?
Clitoris.
Oh my gosh, you're kidding.
No.
Wow.
And so I talked to Mary, and she said, Mark, if you take that word out, you're going to have to answer to me.
Yeah.
So we left it in. We got it published by a smaller publisher, and it was out in hardback for many, many years. And now it's only available in softback.
Yeah.
But it's still being used. So Belly Buttons or Navels was, I believe, the first children's book to use the word clitoris.
Wow.
So
I wonder if it's the only children's book to use.
No.
I mean, I'm racking my brain here. Like, what?
No, there are a couple of others.
Okay.
So that was groundbreaking. I remember once I was at a presentation, and someone said, at what age should a child learn the word clitoris? And I said, well, that's like saying, at what age should a child learn the word nostril?
Yeah.
It's a body part. And so.
Yeah. If you had not been asked to teach that class, I mean, are you somebody that was already sort of passionate about sex in any sort of professional way? Do you think?
None.
Is this a total accident?
Yes.
Wow.
If you would have asked me when I was very young what I was going to be when I grew up, I was going to be a hockey player.
Oh my gosh. Such a hockey fan. That's
So no, there was nothing, but I saw that first class when I was, middle school, 12 and 13-year-olds.
Yeah. Very curious.
And very, sometimes a little wild and rambunctious.
Yeah.
But when I started talking about sexual contact, intercourse, and oral, you could hear a pin drop in that room.
Yeah.
And I remember the next day, the kids came running into the room, sat in their seats.
Ready for more?
And, was saying, well, let's get started, which was, and I remember when I introduced the first book we were going to use, and it was called Love and Sex in Plain Language by Eric W. Johnson. It was written on a 5th grade reading level.
Mm-hmm.
And these kids loved it. And I remember one of them coming up to me and said, a 9th grader grabbed my book and said, how come we didn't get that book last year?
Yeah. And I imagine that you found yourself a natural for this, right? You were comfortable answering these questions. You had a very good attitude about sex.
Yes. And going to that human sexuality program really helped me. It broadened my mind. It let me look at sexuality on a continuum.
Yeah.
And then looking at gender identity. And it was just a real eye-opening experience for me.
Mm-hmm.
And, having made over 50 films in my career and covering a wide range of sexual and gender issues, it's been a very gratifying career, which is not over.
Yeah.
But I did a film called Trans, which is about transgender.
Yeah.
And it's available on Amazon Prime. It's also available on my website, SexSmartFilms.com, which has 615 sex education, therapy, and research films. So when Trans came out, and this was in 2012, I had no idea it would be received so well.
Wow.
I mean, the first year I went to 40 film festivals, and probably in the first year and a half, I went to 40 universities, and then some the American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists had a screening at their meeting. and a number of others. And the reception, I mean, if you go to Amazon Prime and read the reviews, there are, I think, 230 some odd reviews. There are some that bring tears to my eyes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wonderful film. I've seen it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
But I'll give you one story. I was in New Hope, Pennsylvania, which is where Dr. McGinn, the surgeon in the film, lives. And she has she has a bed and breakfast. And so she gave me a room in the bed and breakfast, and I come down for breakfast, and a woman who I've never seen before came up to me and said, "Are you Mark?" And I said, "Yes." And she came up to me and gave me a big hug. And I said, "I don't get it." She said, "My daughter is transgender."
Wow.
When she first told me she was, I was not supportive and I was not on board. And a friend of mine gave me your film. And now I'm here with her. She had surgery yesterday.
Wow.
So, the suicide rate in that community, there was a survey done that said to 6,000 transgender people, have you ever seriously contemplated or attempted suicide? 41% responded yes.
Wow.
And if the suicide rate in the general community, I think, is less than 2%, would answer. So,
yeah.
So, that's a film I feel has saved lives, if you know what I mean.
Yes. Yeah. So how, over the years, how have you picked the topics for the films, or, what's the variety of kinds of material you've created?
Well, when I first got into it, and I was working for myself and doing my own films, I would just pick a subject that I thought was popular. And so, or not, I shouldn't say popular. I should say that we needed some instruction on. So I remember one of my early films was called Treating Vaginismus.
Wow.
And, there was nothing out on it, and most people didn't know what it was. And it turned out to be an important film. Then when I went to Sinclair in North Carolina, they were doing sex therapy and instructional films for adults. And I had done a film in the late 70s called Becoming Orgasmic with Joseph Lopiccolo and Julia Hyman, based on their book. And they wanted to redo it. So we did Becoming Orgasmic in the 90s. And all these films I'm mentioning are available on SexSmartFilms.com.
Okay.
So Becoming Orgasmic was made in the late 90s, and it's still being used. And every once in a while, I'll get a call from someone who'll say, it's a great film, but the clothes they're wearing and the hairstyle, and that's always a problem.
Yeah.
You make a film, and 3 years later, the hairstyles are different. And what I try to tell people is focus on the content. The content is accurate. And unfortunately, the people in the film are not wearing 2019 attire. So.
Well, how often do you find that the content becomes outdated? Or, do you go remake films when the science has evolved?
No, we can't afford to do that.
Okay.
But all the films are on the website.
Yeah.
And, there are some films where there's like the Sensate Focus, which are exercises that Masters and Johnson made for sex therapy.
Right.
There are two different programs, and there are some people who like the older ones, and there are some people who like the newer ones. And then there are some people who say, well, Masters and Johnson really wanted it. So, a lot of it is your opinion or your therapist's opinion. And, when we talk about what makes a good film, a film is a tool. And a tool has to be used properly for it to be effective.
Yeah.
And I always tell people who use films, number one, before you use a film, you need to preview it. And believe it or not, I've had people who've come to me and said, I showed this film in my class, and oh my God. I said, did you watch it before you showed it? So then the next step is you have to introduce the film, give a rationale for showing it,
Mm-hmm.
and then show the film. And when you give that rationale, if there's something in the film you think the students will notice, like hairstyle, or point that out and tell them not to focus on that.
Yeah.
I had a student once say, I can date a film by the pubic area. The older films had a lot of pubic hair. The newer films have less pubic hair.
Right.
So these are things that you should think about when you're showing a film, or even when you're watching a film.
Yeah.
And then after you introduce it, you screen the film. And then, to me, the most important part is afterward processing it, talking about the film, answering questions, asking questions, letting the students discuss. Were they uncomfortable by the film? Did they learn something? What did they like about it? What did you not like about it? And use it. That is the learning experience. So you can take a film that you don't like and make it into a learning experience. So
how much are you involved in conversations like that? Like, how much are you screening these films and leading some of the learning experience around them?
Well, now, like, I'm still doing screenings of trans at universities. So and that there we have a Q&A at the end. So but it's mostly, large audiences, so we don't break up into small groups. But that's the kind of thing. I may be going to a university to do some work, but right now it's just large screenings.
Yeah. It's Jessa here, just taking a quick break. Thanks for listening. Are you interested in being a guest on the show? I'm always looking for people with expertise to share that could enrich other people's sex lives. And I'm also interested in hearing from people who have transformed their own intimate relationship and would want to share their story with my listeners. So if you've got something to contribute to the discussion and want to see about being featured on an upcoming episode, please visit our website, bettersexpodcast.com, and check out the Be a Guest details. You'll find everything you need there. What have you noticed that's changed over I can't count the years here, 30, 40, 35, 40 years you've been doing this?
Yeah.
Are there noticeable changes culturally or response to the films?
Well, culturally, absolutely. And the cultural things are relative to the technology. So back in the day, someone wanted to show a film, they had to get a projector, they had to darken the room, they needed a screen, and it was a major ordeal, not an ordeal, but it was a process to show a single film.
Yeah.
Jump to today, you can be having a discussion in your room and someone can bring up something. You can say, and you go to the internet and you put on a little film that's, you could just bring it. So also the students, back when I first started, the exposure to sexual films was very, very limited.
Yeah.
Now, students have seen lots of pornographic films, and so now it's processing what they've seen and turning it into instruction and sometimes into therapy. But if you look at the technology, I always joke to colleagues, by the time I perfected the technology, it's obsolete. So, I started off with 16 millimeter, then we went to 3/4 inch video, then to Betamax, then Betacam. Then we did digital, and the digital films have evolved. So it's constantly changing.
Yeah.
The business of film, I remember the day when we would ship a 16 millimeter film to a university so they could show it in a classroom next Tuesday, and they would ship it back. They would rent the film.
Yeah, yeah.
And now a lot of people don't pay for films anymore.
Right.
My SexSmartFilms is a subscription base, and you pay a small fee, and you have access to 615 films for what is less than the cost of one 16-millimeter film.
Okay, yeah, I was going to ask about that. Is it a fee-based thing or is it free access? Okay, so that's how you're funding the this.
Well, there are pay-per-views, so you could watch a short film for 99 cents, a long film for $2.99. There are subscriptions for individual users that are $16 for a month, $34 for 3 months, and $99 for a year.
Oh, okay.
And then universities and therapists will get these multi-user accounts, which are more money. So
that's good to know. I'm going to look into that for my. I'm thinking for my clients, that would be a wonderful resource.
Well, and the clients sometimes, a therapist. The most common film that a therapist prescribes is the Sensate Focus #1 film.
Yeah,
which is the sexual anatomy and physiology, and it gives you basic sexual anatomy and physiology. And I'll find, they'll watch it for 99 cents, and then I see sometimes after they watch that one film, they subscribe on their own.
Right.
So, and the cultural thing, one of the things I have on the site is condom commercials and HIV public service announcement from over 250 countries.
Yeah.
And if you see the public health messages around the world, you'll see, there's a correlation. And I do this presentation where I show a bunch of them. And, like I remember I showed one from Switzerland, and you see nudity and simulated sexual behavior. And they say they show that on television. And I said, yes. And I have this chart of HIV rates and teen pregnancy rates, which was put out by the World Health Organization.
Yeah.
I said, let's look up those rates in Switzerland. Practically non-existent.
Wow.
Where here in the United States, we have a much higher. In fact, the United States HIV rate and teen pregnancy rate is 3 to 6 times higher than every European country. So
now, do you come up against, over the course of this career, do you come up against more opposition or attack, or have there been actual threats to your ability to do this work, or is it not that extreme?
No, mostly the people who are opposed to my work don't use it.
Yeah. So nobody's trying to take you down or
no, I have not
pornography or something like that.
No, I've been called. So someone's called me a medical pornographer.
Never heard that term.
I had never heard it either. But the opposition, tool is just not using it.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do people find out about, I'm thinking back in the day when you were working with Sinclair, and that was pre-internet also, right? Right. So was it only universities that discovered you? Was it academic, or how were people?
Well, that, Sinclair was a marketing company, and I was their producer.
Okay.
And now I'm a producer, and I'm not a marketer. So the way people find out about me is through therapists, through academics, word of mouth. So, I don't have a big marketing strategy.
Yeah.
Done for. But, I've never had a complaint, about someone say, oh, I don't like your website, and because it's a subscription, you could subscribe, and then if you don't like it, don't resubscribe. But I've got to get a lot of resubscribers.
Yeah.
So. And
so can you you've named some of the films that you've got on there and some of the most popular ones, but can you talk a little bit more about some of the 600 and whatever films that are there, like the breadth of the content?
Well, the films are divided into 3 major categories.
Okay.
Education, research, and therapy. So under education, there are many, many subtopics which you can go to. There's also a place where you can put in a keyword and search for it.
Okay.
And I have films from the 1940s to the present day. So I have a lot of the old sex education films, which I think are important because you could see how the whole educational system has evolved over the years. There was a time when they only taught about disease. Then there was disease and biology. And then in the late 60s, they started making sexually explicit films. So
interesting. So you've become sort of the archive for this stuff.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of those older films. I have the newer films. And there are films under education for children, for teens, for adults, for older adults.
Okay.
In the research component, I have the first interview with Alfred Kinsey that was on the Today Show in 1955.
Wow.
Yeah. And I have interviews with some of his colleagues. I have an interview with his two daughters, one of whom has passed away. Then I have the first film that was done on the G-spot with Beverly Whipple.
Yeah.
And so lots of historical sex research.
Okay.
And then I have all the sex therapy films, which began really in the 70s. The first of which were films that followed Masters and Johnson's sensate focus techniques.
Right.
And then I have a film, I remember doing a film called Diagnosing and Treating Erectile Problems.
Right.
And then when I was working for Sinclair, we did a film on erectile problems. And in the middle of doing the film, I read in the newspaper that a new drug was coming out. It was called Viagra.
Right.
So we had to stop production of the film and then do a little scenario on this new drug.
Yeah.
Which was mind-blowing.
Yeah, small little thing that's been long forgotten,
Yes. So, and then we have films on gender identity, beginning with children.
Yeah.
And there are films from different countries, so we have to give a cross-cultural perspective on sexuality.
Great. What's in the pipeline? What are you working on?
I'm working on a documentary called Love After War, and it's about people who are in the military and have been either physically or mentally injured and how it affects their intimate life when they return.
Ah, okay.
So, and that's in the works. And then, I get lots of people who have ideas for films and we talk about them. And so every time you start talking about a film, I would say maybe 1 in 10 of those discussions turn into a reality.
Right.
But that's how they start.
Yeah.
And I'm always looking for new ideas.
That makes sense.
And there's a university that's talking to me now that we may collaborate. So it would be like, how universities have their own publishing companies like Princeton University Press. Yeah. It would be that we would follow that model.
Okay. Well, what a wonderful lifetime of work, and not over yet, but I'm just thinking that fork in the road you hit when you were young like that to create so much meaningful content for all.
Yes.
That's
thank
amazing.
you.
Yeah. So SexSmartFilms.com. That's the website that everybody should go check out.
Yes. And
subscribe.
and if you need to reach me, you can, on the homepage is my contact information.
Perfect. And I will definitely link, in the show notes too, so people can easily, find you. So
great.
Well, thank you so much for spending the half an hour with me.
Well, Jessa, thank you. It was a pleasure.
Great.
You've been listening to Better Sex. Please visit our website, bettersexpodcast.com, for show notes and additional episodes.
And that's a wrap for today. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. If you are enjoying the podcast, if some of this material resonates with you and you would like to make a difference and make sure that this keeps coming out in the world once a week, ongoing, there are a couple things you could do to show your appreciation. The first would be to go to iTunes and rate and review the show. That really helps us be found by new listeners when you review the show on iTunes. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/iTunes. The other thing I want to invite you to consider is becoming a Patreon. For a small monthly pledge, you get some benefits. So for $2 a month, you get advance access to every single episode. For $5 a month, you get a chapter of my upcoming new book. And for $10 a month, I host quarterly get-to-know-you and question-and-answer chats over the web, and you get invited to that. I would love to have your membership in that, become part of the Better Sex family. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/Patreon, which is Patreon. Again, thanks for listening. I'm glad you're here. Feel free to comment, ask questions, get in touch. I'd love to hear from listeners. Thanks.